back to another episode of the North Carolina Real Estate Show. I'm Tiffany Weber, real estate attorney in Mooresville, North Carolina at Thomas and Weber. And as I have been for the last several weeks, I'm joined by my husband, Ryan Weber.
I'm out of breath.
He has been running around like crazy getting all of this set up. Um, yes, I know this is where we shoot it every week, but he has a video marketing company, so he has to use this equipment for other people other than me. So,
Well, we built this over here, so most people don't know that we have in the law firm a basement, and in the basement is where my office, which is over there, and the studio is, which is where we record. So we created this down in the basement, so we don't have to bother your real estate practice to record our content to help our real estate agent friends.
which we really appreciate. And it's very convenient for me to
Yes.
no longer have to drive to your old studio.
Yeah, so I built a little half wall over here to try and make it look a little nicer, and putting it back together this morning got me out of breath.
Yeah, well, we appreciate your work and your
I
efforts.
think it looks good though.
It does look good.
Comment on the thing. Does it look good? If you're here.
Yeah, but
There's
you're
Tiff.
only allowed to say that it looks good. So today our topic is, and this was at the request of our paralegal manager,
Tanya.
Tanya, as they say, Tana Garrity. So she asked if we could talk about the differences in commercial and residential closings. And I think it's a great topic because we have a lot of agents who, after you've been doing residential a while, some of them will get the commercial bug and want to get involved in that. Or just as often we see residential investors who are like, okay, really enjoying doing the single family residential rentals, but I would like to rent to some commercial tenants, or maybe I want to buy an apartment building or whatever it
Or
may be.
as they grow their network, more business people might say, hey, I'm looking for a building to purchase, or, my business is growing, I'd like to purchase. So, if you've been doing it for a while and typically are doing well, you make connections that move you sometimes into commercial real estate.
Yeah. So one of the things that's different between commercial and residential closings in North Carolina, we talk a lot about the North Carolina standard offer to purchase in residential. There is one for commercial, but in my experience, it's not often used. So one of the main differences is, when does the attorney get involved? Or I should rephrase it as, when should the attorney get involved?
Should, I'm assuming, not before the contract's even
Yes.
done.
Yes. So in commercial, as you're dealing most often with non-standard contracts, that they are negotiated, essentially every term of the contract being negotiated, the attorney should be involved in that process. We are not always involved in that process. Frequently we get signed contracts that are non-standard that, you're like, I hope my client at least read this before they signed it. Not always the case, but in commercial, typically the attorney is involved in the contract negotiation. Not necessarily advising you as to price or anything. Your agent's still going to do that. Or as an agent, you're still heavily involved in that process. But there are terms in there. They can vary so widely depending on the purpose of the investment. There's just so many different things that can vary from residential real estate that the attorney can provide some value up front on. The next thing, negotiating the title commitment. So residential title commitment, there's not a whole lot of back and forth that needs to happen with the title company. But on commercial, your lender may have certain endorsements that they require, or certain exceptions that cannot be present on the final policy. So that means there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes to get whatever documents are required so that the title company can either delete the exception or provide the endorsement, whatever that may be. So there's a lot more work being done on the title commitment side than there is in a traditional, easy, vanilla residential real estate closing. Some other things.
The only one I know is it takes a lot longer.
It does take a lot longer, and that's because of all of these other things that happen.
Yeah.
Zoning's a big one. From my past life in litigation, you've lived through some zoning things with me. An example here in Mooresville, we have Costco. People are really happy about that now.
Yeah. I mean, the zoning with Costco, everyone was up in arms because they didn't know what of what Costco was promising. And will deliver on because of all the other facts that you have on their history.
Yeah, and there was a lot that went into that particular case, but Costco had some challenges when coming to Mooresville, and thankfully all of those challenges got resolved. But part of that commercial process, I mean, they were under contract to buy the property. This wasn't they were thinking about buying this property and then the rezoning got denied, so they said, "Oh no, no, they were under contract. Like we were moving towards closing, and the rezoning got denied." So that's part of the commercial process is making sure one, either that your zoning is already appropriate for your intended use or that you are engaging in the rezoning process so that you can use the property the way you want to. So, for example, Costco, the rezoning was voted down with the Board of Commissioners. We got back to a rehearing where Costco was approved, but that was not without some challenges. It is no shock because it was all over the news at the time that the town was sued for the rezoning decision, and that kind of hinged on this one little document called the Statement of Reasonableness, and it had to comply with certain North Carolina statutes and with the town's own zoning ordinance. And there were some words in there that should have been in there that weren't in there. That long story short, because this could be a much longer story, got us back to a rezoning hearing. That was the whole point. And that's also, I can say all this stuff because it's public.
Yeah.
I'm not revealing anything secret here. But you could go back and watch the rezoning hearings. I think the videos are still up, but
Probably.
go back and watch those. And the second time around, Costco was approved. But had it not been, then the deal is dead in the water. No Costco, potentially no other stores there. It could have been stuck the way that it was, frozen.
And no, we didn't get a lifetime membership for allowing Costco to be here. I know that's what everyone is thinking.
That was a rumor. I
Well,
wish.
we still also pay our membership to Costco.
Yep.
I
They have
did-
no idea who I am. I
No, I
promise you.
did try and get something named after us, and they looked at us like we didn't know. They didn't know who we were, so
Because they don't.
they don't. But I know that was on the minds of everyone listening. Is do
Did
you
they
have
get
a
their
lifetime
membership?
We do not.
No, we pay our membership
Yep.
just like everybody else. So zoning is a really big part of the commercial process, and that is another reason why it takes longer, because when you're dealing with entities that are not the buyer and seller, in the residential closing, it's pretty straight up. The timelines are mostly dependent upon the buyer and the seller and not too many outside parties. Commercial, you're involving the zoning authority, you're involving environmental assessor. There's all kinds of other parties that need to be involved. Maybe contractors, so that you can get permits to build what you want to build, or whatever it may be. And all of those people, you cannot control their schedules. Zoning itself takes a long time. So it's not your traditional 30, 45 day at the longest close date from contract to close. This is going to be easily, 90, 120, 365. I mean,
Yeah,
long.
you just worked on one that is getting finished up. Started in November and just is finishing here in May.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's relatively typical, like
Mm-hmm.
6 months ish. I mean, I hear you talk about them all the time, where it's like, oh yeah, they've been under contract or negotiating for a year,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just now closing.
Yeah, and that is in part due to all of these outside entities that have to be involved in the commercial closing process that maybe would not typically be involved in a residential closing process. So when you're dealing with other people's agendas and other people's timelines and schedules, that influences when you're able to close, for sure. I kind of alluded to this. One thing that you don't have to do in a residential closing is a phase 1 environmental assessment, which you would have to do in a commercial closing in most cases, just to make sure that there are no environmental hazards, that what you're planning on doing with this commercial use is not going to put the public at risk or the environment at risk. Sometimes you have to go another level to phase 2, but often phase 1. If you've got tenants, you're going to have to get copies of the leases, the security deposits. If you're buying a property that's got tenants in place already, you're going to want to know the terms of the leases inside and out. And then you're also going to want these things called estoppels. So that's a fancy way of saying it's basically everyone agreeing in writing what the terms are. And, for example, if you're a tenant saying, yep, that is the term, those are the terms of my lease. I pay $1,000 a month and I am paid through May 2023. The terms of my lease, like I am under,
I am a stopped.
I am stopped from saying I didn't sign that. Oh, that's not what it is kind of like it's a stop sign from someone saying that's not what we agreed to. So that's kind of like the shorthand for
Estoppel.
estoppel.
We
There you
need
go.
to we need to make
Estoppel in the name of
we need to
love.
make we need to make some legal definitions, but we need to, if any of you guys have children, you probably know who Miss Rachel is. And so we need to teach real estate agents and just real estate people in general the way Miss
Yeah.
Rachel teaches children.
Yeah.
Estoppel. Estoppel.
Estoppel. Yay! You can tell we have a 1-year-old. So estoppels are not just for like tenants. It also could be if you have, in residential, it'd be like an HOA, but like a condo association or some sort of community association. The estoppel certificate would say, yes, they're in compliance with the restrictions. They have paid their dues up through X date, whatever it may be. And it's, again, stopping the HOA from saying, oh, they didn't pay their dues or whatever it may be. So it's everyone getting on the same page about what obligations have been met and have not. Other things. So the loan documents are different. That's also, a standard residential closing. I've done plenty of videos about the types of things you expect to see in your loan package. But when you have a commercial closing, your lender is going to be asking for some different things. Like if you've got a tenant, assignment of leases. So essentially, if you go under, you stop paying your mortgage, they have to take over, and they foreclose on you, then they're going to be able to step into your shoes as landlord and accept the rent from the tenant. There's more to it than that. I'm trying to keep it simple because, we're trying not to have a 1 hour long
Joe Rogan
podcast
style.
today. Another thing, environmental indemnity. That can also be called like a hazardous substances indemnity agreement, but you're basically promising to the lender, hey, I'm not going to do anything that would cause environmental damage. If I do, then I'm going to cover you for it. I'll make sure you're held harmless. It's basically, one, I promise not to do it, but if I do, it's all on me. Another thing that people abbreviate, SNDA, that's subordination, non-disturbance, and I don't know if it's a torment or a tournament, I don't know, but that's the word. And it is an agreement when you have a tenant in place where kind of like your lender and your tenant have this deal where, okay, if we have to foreclose on the landlord, we're going to step in the shoes of the landlord. We're not going to disturb your tenancy. We're not going to kick you out. We're not going to say the lease is invalid. Basically, we're saying you've got rights as a tenant and we agree to honor those. So ideally, you would have tenant, landlord, and lender all involved in that. Other things that you would not have in a residential closing are UCC financing statements. UCC is the Uniform Commercial Code. So like if you've got fixtures or whatever it may be that the lender's taking a security interest in, those would be secured by a financing statement. Personal guarantees. Typically, if you're borrowing a residential property, you are most often borrowing in your individual name. So a personal guarantee is not necessary. But in commercial real estate, you are most likely borrowing in the name of your entity. Say you've got a newly formed entity with no history, but you as an individual have great credit history, really good assets. Your lender's going to want you to promise to pay if your entity doesn't pay. So that's what the personal guarantee is.
If a person was purchasing a property as Airbnb or VRBO, vacation rental, would it have a personal guarantee? Would that be considered commercial? Would you consider that residential? If it's a residential property that they're going to use for Airbnb?
I've seen it done both ways. So I've seen, kind of like your known residential lenders, some of them have a cap of like, we can do up to 10 loans with you or whatever it may be. So some of them will do investment loans for rental properties, and it's a traditional residential loan package plus a few extra little documents. that are important but not as substantial as like a commercial loan package. And then I've also seen people buy investment properties with a commercial loan, which is typically a shorter term, 5 years, maybe 7 or 10, but most often 5 years. Like we've done it both ways.
Yeah.
So we've done it with the 5 year term amortized over 25 years. We've done it 30 years. So it just depends.
I just signed the papers.
It's
Just
like,
sign
I didn't
whatever you
know.
give me.
I didn't know we did that. You're like, I had no idea.
I'm going on record. I don't know, or I'm not legally obligated. Does it work? Would I be
No,
set free?
no.
All right.
And then you also have extra attorney work. And I mean, it's kind of obvious from the length of time I've been talking nonstop about all this stuff that the attorney has extra things to do in commercial versus residential. We have to draft opinion letters and some other stuff just to satisfy the lender that the borrower is properly organized. They have the authority to enter into the loan, that, we don't know of them violating any agreements or breaking any laws by doing this. I mean, that the loan documents are valid and enforceable in the state. Like, this topic, it's important, but as you can hear, it's really nerdy.
Which is why you love it.
Well, I mean, it's why you're not saying a whole lot.
I am useless other than knowing commercial means there's businesses in it.
Yeah, or used for a business purpose. And that's kind of like everything I had on my list without going super dry. And
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any questions, type them in the chat here. We'll answer. We'll let Tiff answer. Doesn't have to just be on residential or commercial closings. If you have any real estate questions, law questions, or just questions about Miss Rachel, we could answer all of those.
We know a lot about Miss Rachel.
Yep.
Miss Rachel, if you're watching this, I don't have as many subscribers as you, but we are very grateful to you.
Just ask away. That's kind of why we do these live. So we record these 4-hour podcasts, which is released every Wednesday, the North Carolina Real Estate Show. It's on all of your normal podcasting platforms. We usually cut down a lot of the ending Q&A stuff, and that's why we record them live. So if people do want to ask questions, we can answer them for them while they're listening.
Mm-hmm.
Other housekeeping though, May
17th
at 1 p.m. Tiff is hosting an online masterclass. We're calling it Real Estate Closings 201 because it is more advanced issues that people and real estate agents are seeing. And we want to, we talk about on our YouTube channel, on our podcast, all of the basic stuff because we can help more people. In this one, it's going to get much more specific, much more nerdy.
Mm-hmm.
And much more, you won't see these issues as often, but if you do, it could be a real big issue.
Yeah. So you may not see them that often, but knowing how to spot them is going to help you. Knowing these issues and knowing how to prevent them helps you on every transaction. Even if maybe 1 out of 20 transactions has this problem, great. You don't want to deal with these kinds of problems all the time, but knowing what caused it, how to avoid it, et cetera, is going to help on the other 19 as well. So the plan, I'm still working on finalizing the presentation, but the plan is to take 5 thorny scenarios and talk about, okay, this is how this came about. Was it avoidable? Yes or no? If it was avoidable, how? Who could have done something to prevent this? Is it fixable? Yes or no? If it's fixable, how do we fix it? What are some things that we can do to keep, the whole goal is everybody wants to get to closing.
Right.
You don't go under contract because you want to terminate,
right?
Because you want to have issues. That if we keep that in mind, trying to move to closing, then we'll talk through those scenarios of how to do it. So having some visuals so you can see what we're talking about. Sometimes it's hard whenever we're on the phone with agents saying, yeah, we've got this, the house was built within the setbacks. And they're like, what do you mean? You got to see it to understand. So we're going to dive deeper.
Yeah. But it is registration only. We only have 100 spots for people. So if you do want
I'm
that,
surprised at how many people signed up.
yeah,
already.
we are. We actually have a lot of people signed up already. So if you do want that link, just comment on wherever you're listening, and I'll get on there later today and shoot you the link for you to register for the the masterclass. Once again, it's May 17th, 1 p.m. It'll be about 30 minutes ish of education, then 30 minutes of you guys being able to actually come on screen. So the platform we're using, you can actually come on screen and talk one-on-one and have a conversation with Tiff about your situation. So it's
Generally speaking, no legal advice, of course.
but it's going to be a little more interactive than what you would typically think of, an online presentation. But yeah, sign up, and if you got questions on that, let us know. But like I said, just comment below, and we will shoot you over the registration link for that. Any final remarks for you there, Tiff? No questions today. People liked what you had to say.
Well, it's so dry. I knew it as soon as I was just looking at you and you were like, sure. Like it's important. It's needed. I think people need to understand the differences and have an idea of, if you want to get into commercial real estate, awesome. You don't need to know everything, but you need to know that it's going to be more. You need to be open-minded and understanding that there will be more required of you, and be open to listen when people are explaining it to you. Some people will be new into commercial and they're like, well, I've never had to do that before. Yeah, you've never invested in commercial real estate before too. So you're right. You haven't had to do that in residential. This is a little bit different. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll close this out so we can put this as a podcast.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the North Carolina Real Estate Show. Once again, Tiffany Weber at Thomas & Weber, and we will catch you on the next episode.